Before the sun appears, the heat is already waiting. It has been trapped inside the rock all night. It hangs above the salt, and with every passing hour, it becomes harder to escape. This is the Danakil Depression, a vast basin of salt, volcanoes, and fractured earth in northeastern Ethiopia. In some places, the land lies more than 100 meters below sea level. Rain is rare. Shade is almost impossible to find, and the horizon seems to tremble beneath the sun. At Erta Ale, historical measurements recorded one of the highest average annual temperatures ever documented for a settled place. But heat alone does not explain this landscape. The ground itself is alive. Steam escapes through narrow cracks. Hot water rises through ancient layers of salt. Minerals stain the earth yellow, green, white, and deep orange. From a distance, the colors appear almost beautiful. Up close, they reveal something far more hostile. Some of these pools are intensely hot. Some are more acidic than battery acid. Others contain so much salt that even microscopic organisms may struggle to survive. It looks like a landscape imagined for another planet. But this is Earth, and people have lived around it for centuries. The Danakil Depression was not created by a single volcano. It exists because this part of Africa is slowly being pulled apart. Far beneath the surface, three enormous sections of the Earth's crust meet: the Arabian Plate, the Somali Plate, and the Nubian Plate. Their movement is almost impossible to see during a human lifetime, only a few centimeters each year. But continents do not need to move quickly. They only need time. As the plates separate, the crust stretches and thins. The land sinks. Magma rises through the fractures. Volcanoes form along the broken ground, and earthquakes remind the people living here that the landscape is still changing. The depression also carries the memory of an ancient sea. Long ago, seawater entered parts of this basin. Later, volcanic activity and shifting land cut it off. The water evaporated beneath the extreme heat, leaving enormous layers of salt behind. Today, those deposits stretch across the desert like a frozen white ocean. There are no waves, no cool breeze coming from the water, only salt, heat, and distance. Scientists believe the rifting beneath this region may continue for millions of years. One day, it could help create a new ocean basin. But that future belongs to geological time. For the people here, survival is measured in hours, in the distance to the next water source, in the strength of an animal, in how much work can be completed before the afternoon heat becomes unbearable. Above them, the air bends. Below them, a continent continues to open. To an outsider, Danakil can appear empty. There are few permanent roads, few signs of modern infrastructure, and long stretches of land where almost nothing seems to move. But before dawn, figures begin to emerge across the salt flats. Men carry wooden poles, ropes, and simple hand tools. Camels move behind them in long, patient lines. Their feet follow paths that have been crossed for generations. From the air, the people look small, almost lost inside the landscape. But they are not lost. They know where they are going. This is the homeland of the Afar, a people whose history is tied to the lowlands of Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Djibouti. They have raised animals here, traveled across the desert, protected wells, followed seasonal grazing routes, and built livelihoods around one of the few resources this land provides in abundance: salt. The Danakil Depression may look like the edge of the world, but that is the view of someone arriving from somewhere else. For the people who belong here, this is not an empty wasteland. It is a map filled with meaning. A distant ridge may mark the safest route. A cluster of trees may reveal hidden water. A stretch of open ground may carry the memory of an old journey. The desert does not explain itself to strangers. Its knowledge must be learned. And in Danakil, that knowledge can mean the difference between returning home and never returning at all. You are watching Edge of Earth, a series about the people who build lives in places most of us were taught to avoid. Because the edge of the world is not defined by distance. It is defined by the conditions people are willing to endure to remain where they belong. The Afar do not survive Danakil by pretending the desert is harmless. They survive by understanding exactly what it can do. They know which routes remain passable after rare rainfall. They know where water may still be found when familiar sources disappear. They recognize the point in the day when continuing forward becomes more dangerous than stopping. This knowledge is not usually learned from a map. It is carried through experience, through repetition, through stories told by parents, herders, traders, and elders. A child growing up here learns to read the land differently. The direction of the wind matters. The condition of an animal matters. Even silence can carry information. For generations, many Afar families have depended on pastoralism. they raise goats, sheep, cattle, and camels. In a landscape where crops cannot be relied upon, livestock make life possible. Animals provide milk. They carry water and supplies. They can be traded for grain, clothing, medicine, or other necessities. A camel can cross distances that would exhaust a person. A goat can survive on vegetation too sparse for larger animals. But every animal must eat. Every animal must drink. And when pasture disappears, a family cannot simply wait for the land to recover. They must move, not because they are wandering without direction, but because movement has always been part of survival. Yet hardship is not the only story here. Families still gather. Meals are shared. Children play in the shade of simple shelters. News travels between settlements. People celebrate marriages, remember the dead, resolve disputes, and maintain bonds across enormous distances. A place that looks silent from above is filled with relationships invisible to the camera. The desert may separate communities physically, but survival depends on connection. A well may be used by more than one group. Information about pasture may travel from one family to another. A traveler arriving from a distant settlement may bring news, warnings, or help. No household survives entirely alone. This is one reason belonging matters so deeply. To leave Danakil would not only mean leaving the heat. It could mean leaving a network of people who understand your life. People who know your family, people who recognize the animals you own, the routes you travel, and the history you carry. An outsider may look across the desert and notice only what is missing. No green fields, no permanent river, no easy road toward another life. But the people who know this land see something different. They see water points, grazing roads, seasonal patterns, places where animals can rest, places where danger increases, places connected to births, marriages, journeys, and loss. What appears empty to one person may be crowded with memory to another. But memory alone cannot feed a family. Tradition cannot replace lost livestock, and belonging does not protect anyone from hunger. The desert must offer something in return. Across the white floor of Danakil, it does. Salt has been extracted from this region for centuries. Before modern roads reached the depression, blocks of salt were carried by camel caravan toward markets in the Ethiopian highlands. The journey was long. The work was punishing. But salt was valuable. It preserved food, supported trade, and in earlier periods of Ethiopian history, shaped forms of exchange across the region. Even today, workers still enter the salt fields with hand tools. They break through the hard surface, lift heavy slabs from the ground, then cut them into blocks that can be loaded and transported. The tools may appear simple. The process is not. The workers must understand where the salt can be separated cleanly. They must work quickly before the heat becomes overwhelming. And every finished block must be moved across a landscape that offers almost no relief. For some families, this work connects the ancient desert to the modern economy. The salt leaves Danakil. Money, food, and supplies return. It is dangerous work, exhausting work. But it is also one of the reasons people continue to enter a place that seems determined to keep them out. Before sunrise, the workers gather. The camels wait. The tools are lifted, and across a salt bed formed by a vanished sea, another working day begins. Block by block, the people of Danakil opened the ancient salt road. For thousands of years, the Danakil Depression has offered humans one of the few things this harsh land provides in abundance: salt. Across this endless white landscape, salt has connected the desert with the outside world. Long before modern roads reached this region, camel caravans crossed these plains carrying blocks of salt toward distant markets. The journey was slow. The conditions were brutal, and every step across this desert required patience and endurance. But salt was valuable. It preserved food. It supported trade. And throughout Ethiopian history, it played an important role in the economy of this region. For the people of Danakil, salt was not just something beneath their feet. It was a bridge between this isolated landscape and the rest of the world. Humans have always adapted this way. In frozen landscapes, people learned how to live with ice. On remote islands, people learned how to live with isolation. And here, in one of the hottest places on Earth, people learned how to live with heat. The environment never became comfortable. The desert never became gentle. Instead, people changed themselves. They changed their routines, their movements, their expectations. And that may be the greatest human ability of all. Not controlling the world around us, but finding a way to belong within it. From the air, the Danakil Depression looks empty. a vast landscape of salt and silence. But every line across the ground tells a story. Every footprint, every camel track, every path across the desert. These marks are evidence that humans have been here and continue to return. Because the most valuable resource in Danakil has never been only salt. It has always been knowledge. The knowledge of the land, the knowledge of survival, and the knowledge that even the harshest places on earth can become home. But beneath this ancient landscape, another force continues to shape the lives of those who remain here, a force created deep inside the planet itself. Fire. Deep beneath the Danakil Depression, the Earth is still changing. The same geological forces that created this landscape continue to move beneath the surface. And nowhere is that power more visible than Erta Ale, one of Ethiopia's most active volcanoes, a mountain rising from one of the most extreme environments on Earth. For decades, scientists and explorers have traveled here to witness something extraordinary, a lake of molten rock glowing inside the volcano, a place where the hidden energy of the planet becomes visible. Erta Ale is a reminder that Danakil is not simply a desert. It is a living landscape. The ground beneath this region is slowly being pulled apart. Volcanoes rise, new land forms, and the earth continues its transformation. For people living nearby, the volcano represents danger. But danger is only one part of the relationship between humans and nature. Across history, people have lived beside powerful forces, near rivers that can flood, near mountains that can erupt, near oceans that can destroy. Because a place can be dangerous and still be home. The Danakil Depression is often described as one of the most extreme places on Earth. And it is one of the hottest inhabited regions on the planet. A place shaped by volcanoes, salt, and tectonic forces. A place where survival requires knowledge passed from one generation to the next. But extreme does not mean empty, because behind every difficult environment, there are people who have learned how to belong. The Afar people do not see Danakil as a place abandoned by the world. They see a homeland, a place connected to their history, their families, and their future. From the outside, we often measure places by what they lack, how far they are, how difficult they are, how uncomfortable they seem. But humans have never only searched for the easiest places to live. They have searched for places that mean something. A frozen coastline, a remote island, a desert beneath the sun, a valley beside a volcano. Across the planet, people continue to prove the same thing. Human beings are not simply survivors of the environment. We are builders of relationships with it. This is Edge of Earth, exploring the people who survive, adapt, and build communities in the places where the world seems to end. Because the edge of the earth is not where human stories disappear, it is where they begin.